Greetings, everyone. Welcome to Catalyst Energies. My name is Dee. Thank you for joining me. I am so grateful that you are here. Welcome, everyone. Welcome back. And of course, if you're new here, welcome. Thank you for taking the time to stop by and check out this transmission. We are going to talk about our upcoming new moon in Pisces on the 27th of February. Going to talk about the main astrological themes for the first half of that lunar cycle. Of course, right now, as of this recording, which is the 23rd of February, the big news is that Mars is stationing for its direct motion. So we're going to talk a little bit about that. Check in, of course, since our last full moon in Leo, and do a little bit of work around, the lunation cycle in general. Where are we right now? We're in our last quarter phase of the moon as Mars is stationing. The next full moon is a total lunar eclipse, and that means we're going back into eclipse season. So, of course, eclipses are happening every 6 months, is when the path of the moon crosses the ecliptic plane at her own nodes. And of course, when I do my eclipse forecast, which I will be doing very soon, that's going to be up publicly. I do have a reading special that is goes along with that I'll share with you in just a moment. They happen twice a year, every 6 months. So these are very large cycles. They're very karmic. They're very embedded in terms of the soul journey and evolution. So not only is Mars stationing direct in the sign of Cancer, it's been retrograde since November. It came into its retrograde shadow. It means it came into the area that it is retrograding back to, which is right now, which is 17 degrees Cancer. That was early October. So Mars is not going to come out of its shadow until early May, but that time period is when things really, we're starting to feel, the motivation and the call to action and that ambition and desire with Mars stationing direct, especially in the sign of Cancer, which has a lot to do with our personal power, our feelings, home, family, safety, security at an emotional level, right? A sense of belonging, a sense of loyalty that goes along with the sign of Cancer, right? You're talking about the sign of the crab, right? You have this external shell that is representative of those structures that surround us, that make us feel safe. It's about boundary. So Mars being in Cancer, that action is very much based primarily on our feelings, but also this sense of loyalty, this sense of belonging, this sense of tradition and heritage that allows us to feel like we belong somewhere and that we feel safe and secure. So you can feel that Mars coming direct today. There are some connections to Mercury that I think are really beneficial that we're going to go over. Just kind of check in about how things have been going since the Leo full moon and the year of the snake, right? The Lunar New Year that started with our Aquarius new moon. Just do a little bit of check in. I got some Native American astrology that I want to share with you today that I thought was just very interesting. Symbolism and connection to some of the themes that are going on right now. And then we'll just look at the new moon itself in Pisces and the main transits that are going to be happening for the next 2 weeks. But Mars is primarily the ruling body, the ruling planet of the sign of Aries. And if you are paying attention, you follow astrology, it's something that you are aware of, then you know that the upcoming eclipse season is along the axis, again, of the equinoxes, right? So the Aries Libra axis, and specifically the partial solar eclipse at the very end of March is the new moon, or the sun and the moon in a conjunction will be in the sign of Aries. And so yes, those cycles are much more drawn out. They're deeper. They have a lot more to do with the soul's journey when we're talking about eclipses, especially because we're talking about the nodes of the moon. These are all things that I'm going to go over, and I always do a review of what eclipses are all about when I do my eclipse forecast. So don't you worry if you're getting lost or you just need a refresher. I will be talking about it. But the thing about Mars stationing right now today is that we're feeling the stirrings, right? Because Mars is going to be essentially ruling this upcoming eclipse cycle, especially the solar eclipse. The full moon lunar eclipse, the nodes have shifted into Pisces and Virgo at this point, and so the full moon is not in that sign, but it's still so close to the position of the equinox that I feel like that the energy around Mars is still very much present, but with that solar eclipse, it's going to be Mars is really ruling that eclipse, which will be a cycle of 6 months. The other thing that is really striking, and of course, every astrologer, there are different things that you notice. There are different aspects that really speak to you, that really stand out in terms of your interpretation and what you share with people. But one of the things that really stands out to me is that we're having upcoming retrograde of Venus, Mercury, and the solar eclipse, right? The new moon, which is the solar eclipse, they're all happening at the same degree of Aries, right? This 9 to 10 to 11 degree area of Aries is where Venus and Mercury are both stationing retrograde, okay? And this is also where the eclipse is happening. So when I do the full moon, when I do the eclipse forecast, which will include the full moon total lunar eclipse, we're going to go in a lot more detail about this degree, this portion of the sky, what stars, what constellations are involved, and really unpack that, because the energy surrounding those particular symbols, those archetypes, that degree, that position with Venus, Mercury retrograde, and the eclipse itself, these are themes that are going to be pulled into the next 6 months, and it based on what I'm seeing so far, has a lot to do with the revision of our attitudes, and a lot is changing. But we're starting to feel the stirring right now, kind of like a seed germinating for the first time. This is what Mars, the energy of Mars stationing right now, is starting to stir within all of us. So, of course, knowing, your astrology charts, and I say charts because it really does matter. It doesn't have to just be your natal chart. Of course, that is kind of the foundation for this lifetime, but there are lots of other charts. I'm trying to say starseed charts, your progressed charts, your draconic or your oversoul, all of those things are relevant to the overall template, right? The spiritual template, the soul's template that astrology can help map out for you. So we're already feeling the stirring, and the motivation, the ambition that Mars moving direct. Now, it's not going to come out of its retrograde shadow until May, early May, which is actually when Venus is going to come out of its retrograde as well. Not out of its shadow, but out of its retrograde. So I suspect that May is going to be when things really start to move forward into new territory. But for the time being, we are going to be going, we are going to move into a retrograde of personal planets, of Mercury and Venus. And then we have the eclipse season, but you can feel the Mars stirring. So we'll go into a little bit about that, where Mars is in the sky. Familiarize ourselves with the position of these planets in relation to constellations and other stars, so that we can, make the most out of this temporal map that we call astrology. So I'm going to put my PPE here on, and I know that there's kind of a glare, but eventually we're going to be looking more at other things on the screen as opposed to my face. So now let's just remind ourselves we are now in the year of the snake. If you haven't checked out the special presentation that I did with Kiana, the Cosmic Priestess, we did a collaboration of sacred sound and light language that she offered and brought to the situation, along with the astrology of the year of the snake. That's up on all of the video platforms that I post on. Just to remind ourselves about the year of the snake. This is about strategic, long-range planning. And in fact, I have some Native American astrology that I'm going to share with you, a book that was, that I was borrowing from actually my massage therapist, that she pulled out, and I was just like, ooh, I want to take that. And she's like, oh yeah, you should take this. So their symbolism is different, of course, in terms of the medicine wheel and astrology in general. But there's some interesting overlaps in terms of this time of year. So we're in Pisces season, which means we're coming into a Pisces new moon, but we're still in the last quarter of the previous lunar cycle. So we had that full moon in Leo, really highlighting, do we have the resources to maintain a sense of true independence and self sufficiency for a long and exhausting journey? And it has not exactly been there's been a lot of tests, I would say, even in the last couple of days. I'm sure many of us are feeling it in our own particular way. There have been, certainly in my experience, there have been some moments of deep feelings of doubt and discouragement, and situations that appear on the surface to really be it's a blow after blow after blow, where it just feels like you can't get ahead. And for me personally, it does. And I know I'm not the only one. It feels like 2024 has not ended yet, right? And so on some level, out in the macro, depending on what you're paying attention to, there is a lot of change and movement. And I suspect, of course, with Mars stationing now, that is going to amplify considerably as Mars then starts to move direct and move through the rest of, the last half of the sign of Cancer. So things are going to start being initiated. Now, the territory is not new, right? Because Mars has been retrograde since November. So the initiation and the action and the ambition and the potentiality that we each individually feel and have is turning back on in these areas of Cancer that have to do with home, family, a sense of emotional security, boundary, personal power. So knowing where Cancer is in your chart, certainly knowing how other aspects of your chart interact with Mars right now, certainly gives much more of a clear picture of how these transits affect you. And this is why getting a reading is so important. And of course, I have a reading sale coming up for the upcoming eclipse season that is it is currently available in my store. If you are a person who supports Catalyst Energies on a monthly basis through Subscribestar. Each tier that is available has a progressively larger discount code for any of the services or any of the products in my store, which are basically all readings or energy work sessions, excluding the packages because those are already very deeply discounted. So if you are already on Subscribestar, in the pinned comments, you will find your discount code that applies to you. But if you're not and you're interested in supporting this work on a monthly basis, there are lots of different options, and you can go to the link in the description box below to Subscribestar, and you'll be able to access whatever fits your budget and whatever makes sense for you. And then you'll have a very a discount code that will allow you to have a deep discount. So the premium tier, for instance, you get a 30% discount on pretty much anything that I have to offer, including the special readings and forecasts. So it's an option if you want to support this work. I don't really have right now a one-time donation link necessarily, but I am working on that. I tried to do that before, and it just, for some reason, it just never really clicked in terms of like PayPal or whatever. So maybe I'll create a Venmo account specifically for Catalyst Energies if you're interested in just doing a one-time donation. I know sometimes that makes more sense for people than having a consistent subscription or whatever. So, and I do want to offer something else that's exclusive to those of you who do support Catalyst Energies on a monthly basis. But I'm trying to find out what works for me because, I do have a day job, which is also in the healing arts. And so I have to be very mindful about, what I can commit to. And I do feel like the personal readings are going to really start to come in, not even handy, but are going to be really important moving forward. And I want to make sure that I have enough space and time to accommodate personal readings with people as we move forward, because the leveling up is pretty obvious at this point, and change that's not really predictable, but we're starting to feel the momentum building again with Mars stationing, that it's like the germination of that seed. We don't know how it's going to unfold in the long run. We can't necessarily predict it, but the germination is happening. The process of growth is being initiated right now, and I know that we all feel it in our own way. So let's see, where's a good place to start here? I think maybe let's look at because right now we're at the last week, the last quarter of the lunar cycle that started the Lunar New Year, right? The year of the snake, which again is about strategic planning, long-term patience, right? We talked about how the snake in Chinese astrology is the sixth animal, so in correspondence to the sixth house in the Western astrology system. And that house has a lot to do with the same kind of themes here, which is, you put one foot in front of the other, right? You are putting your resources into functionality, right? And so this is what you do on the daily, right? Whether it's your work routine, whether it's your health and wellness regiment, whether it's a practice of any type, it doesn't matter what type it is. It's really, I like to tell people, because I'm very blunt about astrology, because I think it really lands a lot more with people than like being very ethereal about things. I tend to be more grounded and kind of like, hey, this is what this is. So the people understand how to use this system in a way that makes sense to them, because sometimes I feel like this work can be very inaccessible to the average person. So I try to translate. So the sixth house to me is the house where you get your shit together because you have to. Right? It's one thing with the fifth house, which is the last year that we had, the year of the dragon, which was the fifth animal in Chinese astrology. The fifth house is the heart. It's the passion, right? It's your thrill and excitement and your joy. It's where you take risks. It's where you really express yourself. And that can come through in various ways. It doesn't always have to be happy and joy, happy, happy, joy, joy. It can be sorrow. And the expression of grief. And I'll tell you what, that was my last year for sure. But even with all of that, there still has to be that time where you take that energy and put it into functionality. And that's what the sixth house is. And it's not glamorous. It's not sexy. It is not, it's not the heart bursting open. It is the day in, day out minutia of putting something into functionality. So that's usually a practice. That's usually some sort of new healthcare regimen. That's usually your work routine. You're in your daily in and out. You're one foot in front of the other. Where the rubber meets the road. That is the sixth house, and that is the year of the snake. This whole year is about that strategic planning, that patience, that long-term, viewpoint, which, after last year where it was all dragon energy and it was all just like fire and everything burning down, sometimes it can be very difficult to change gears and see the long view. But that's exactly what we're being tasked with this year of the snake. It's subtle, right? There's a mystery, right? Virgo is the ruler of the sixth house in terms of a sign, and that is the root system under the soil. It's something that doesn't necessarily showcase itself. It's something that is happening underneath the surface. It is the hermit card, right? And so there is a lot of hermit energy, I feel like, with this year of just keeping your head not necessarily down, but like nose to the grindstone, right? Like really doing the work, because that's what the sixth house is. And yes, it is subtle, and there is an element of mystery, certainly with the hermit and under the surface, because what you're doing is bringing that light up and offering it. Because the seventh house in astrology is the offering. It is the relationship with other, whatever that is. And so we as individuals come into that communion in relationship, whether it's with society, whether it's with God, whether it's in a domestic partnership, a marriage, any type of one-on-one relationship where we have a contractual agreement that there is transaction. That's the seventh house. And we bring our best foot forward by the work that we put in the sixth house. And this is this whole year. Now, we started with, of course, the Aquarius new moon that, the popularity that proves ephemeral. Oh, wow. Talk about reality check on so many levels. And you could see it in all kinds of places, okay? All kinds of places that reality check was brought forward, that we had to see ourselves and others for who they really are, as opposed to projecting our ideals onto them. Because Aquarius is about the ideal civilization, the ideal human, right? The ideal social organism, right? That we aspire to. And this is why the 11th house often in astrology is considered the house of our hopes and dreams, because there's an idealism that it represents. And so Aquarius in the 11th house are concurrent with each other. That is, Aquarius does rule the 11th house and vice versa. And so, which is opposite the fifth house of the dragon, right? And so, yeah, all of that passion comes forward to be, projected out and showcased into this ideal situation, the ideal audience, whatever. But the reality is that along with that, you have to accept and be able to see things for what they really are, right? Again, to not project our ideals onto situations or people, but to see them for who they are, and to see ourselves, right? In any situation. And along with that, when we had the Leo full moon, right? The camel crossing the desert, right? The self-sufficiency in the face of a long and exhausting journey. Sometimes the only thing you have in the face of all the other aspects falling away, right? The veil dropping, so to speak, right? The house lights coming up, and all the flaws. Everything has to be seen for what it is. And if you've put so much into that image and it's taken away, it's like, what is there left? Well, it's your own heart, right? It's the passion that is sparked within you when you are in communion with spirit, whatever that means to you. And there have been lots of different ways that this has been tested, especially since that full moon. So I'm going to share the screen here, and I want to show you just something that I find really helpful. And all you have to do if you want to find something like this is to just type into a Google search or any browser search, type in the lunation cycle. Dane Rudhyar, which is, as an astrologer, is like my astrology spirit animal, Dane Rudhyar. I've learned so much from his work and his lunation cycle. But this is just one graph here. And this also brings in the quarters of and all the seasons, right? You can see the solstice and Beltane, and we're coming up onto the spring equinox, and we just had Beltane, right? February into March is that time where things start to stir under the ground, and I feel like many of us are feeling that too. We know that there is a stirring. We can't see it. We don't know exactly how it's going to go. It's just a stirring, but boy, are we feeling it. Now, but where are we? We're at our last quarter moon coming into our balsamic moon phase currently. And when we look at the chart, we can look at, where the moon actually is leading up to our next new moon, which is in the sign of Pisces. And there is a level of mastery that we are being invited ultimately to bring into emergence, right? As you can see here, the new moon energy is incarnate into my new being, and it has not been easy. And we have been put through the ringer in a lot of ways to assess and really have highlighted, do we have what is it that we carry with us across this vast and forbidding desert? How much resource do we have within us in order to take us through this journey? Well, it isn't always presented to us in a way that we may necessarily like or enjoy, but even in those really difficult moments where you feel like you are, you have to use those resources. And when they seem like they're so little, either they're emotional, maybe they're financial, maybe they're social, whatever they are, when you have to use them in a way that you didn't anticipate or you don't want to, sometimes you feel like you're losing something. But if anything, it really can highlight how much you had stored up in the first place. And it's hard. You don't want to have to utilize those resources. And I know I'm being really vague, but that's because I want this to apply to a myriad of situations and not just me personally. But of course, we all have our own situations that we personally learn from and then can teach from. So here is our last quarter moon phase. Revise my thinking, reorient and turn away. So when you get to the last quarter, and all the quarter moon phases, right, are always challenges. They're always crises, personal crises of some sort. And, it was definitely a mutable square. And we had Mercury involved as well, and Jupiter, and we'll look at that in the chart, and so that you have some context for what I'm going to say in terms of the last couple of days. But wow, especially with the moon in Sagittarius, usually that type of energy is very strengthening. It's very optimistic when we have the moon in Sagittarius, but it also does. It also, the catalyzing of our emotional energy sometimes is really uncomfortable because you are, in fact, having to, in order to transmute energy, there has to be contention and friction. And there definitely was. Absolutely. So in that process, it's forcing us to reorient ourselves and turn away from that which is not really serving us anymore. That's where we're currently sitting. And at the same time now, we have Mars that is stationing to move direct. So there is motivation and ambition and a sense of direction that we want to go outward from when it comes to, our how we feel and our sense of personal power. Again, Mars in Cancer. But I just wanted to show you this chart. So if you ever kind of get, a sense of like, I know we're at this part of the moon phase right now. I need a reminder about like, what are some key words here of how to frame what my personal situation is. Well, we're at our last quarter moon phase. Revise my thinking. So what have you had to revise in terms of, especially in terms of not only the Aquarius new moon, right? The ephemeral, the popularity that proves ephemeral, right? This sense of idealism having to be seen as reality. And when we had the highlighted with the full moon of like, what are our resources? Do we have the capacity for total self-sufficiency in the face of something where we're surrounded by essentially, maybe an emotional or energetic desert? Maybe it's a financial desert. And I do feel like that is the case for a lot of people, but it really depends again where Leo is in your chart. Revise my thinking, reorient and turn away. And of course, when we get to the balsamic moon, the last 45 degrees of the lunar cycle, which will be coming very soon. Mutate my consciousness, distill and transform, right? That'll be the time where everything does get distilled down. We revisit the energy of the Aquarius new moon before coming into the next lunar cycle or the new moon, which is where we incarnate into a new being, right? We project out through our intention what it is that we want to cultivate, right? And what we want to emerge. So I really like this chart. Again, just the lunation cycle. You just have to type it into a search engine and maybe go under images, and you can find different images that show this eightfold path. And when I do personal readings for people, especially natal chart readings or the lunar transit readings, I bring this eightfold path absolutely into the reading because it really helps clarify because where you were born, when you were born, where the moon was, what phase it was in when you were born. And I didn't even notice this until just now. I'm sorry for the the quick detour, but you can see even in the middle that this looks like an Ouroboros. I didn't even see that until just now. That was awesome. I bring this in because what moon phase was active when you were born in your natal chart has a lot to do with your personality as well. So that's just one way that this is applicable to now, and certainly in terms of the natal chart. So we're in the last quarter. So reorienting and turning away. What is it that we need to revise in our thinking? Because the last quarter moon is a crisis in consciousness, right? We have to we have to reorient our thinking. We have to turn away from that which we have discovered through the full moon is, we've clarified our purpose here, as you can see, illumine and fulfill. And now we turn away from that which is not going to fulfill that purpose that has been illuminated by the full moon. So I do really like this particular type of chart. It really helps quite a bit. So let's bring this back up here. So I'm going to close out. So I'll do a little detour here just while I have your attention before we really launch into the chart, because I will say once the chart comes up for me personally, that's when the channeling really comes online. And I don't like to, come out of that state very often, because that's where the real magic happens, right? So I'm just going to share with you the homepage of my website just so you know what to look for if you are interested in a reading, or if you're interested, especially in the full moon. It is a full moon, but the eclipse reading that's going to be that is available already on my store. And so let's bring that up real quick. That way you can also know what you're looking at if you go to my website. This is also where you can sign up for my email list, is on my website. If you go to catalystenergies.net, when you go to the homepage at the bottom, a window will pop up and it'll be like, be the first to know. I often will let the email list know ahead of time about certain offerings. If you're not on social media or you're not subscribed to a channel, but you do like to watch these videos, I will send out the link through the email list. I don't spam people. You only get like maybe 2-3 a month at most. If like I said, if I have special offerings, they usually come to my email list first. So you can do that, and it's free, right? You don't have to sign up for any other things other than the email list through Squarespace if you want to be in the know, right? If you want to have access right away, or be the first to know, I should say. Anyway, so here we are. And I just have, this will be linked, this video will be linked here. But this is the flyer for the eclipse season personal astrological forecast. You can book right through the homepage. If you hit that button that says book forecast, and it'll take you to the store, and then you can book right through, and then I'll send you an email and we'll correspond, and then we'll go through the process. So that's something that if you're interested in. And of course, like I said, if you are supporting Catalyst Energies through monthly subscription, you get a discount. Your special discount code is pinned based on your subscription tier on Subscribestar, so you would apply that at checkout and get that discount for this personal astrological forecast. And I factor in all the charts that I have information for. So if you're already a client, it's very easy to go back in and look at your natal chart, your progress chart, your star seed origins, and wrap them all together and give you an overview of what to expect in relation to those things over the next 6 months, especially. So this is a pretty deep discount already for a 6-month forecast. So if you are interested, I would say go ahead and book. And of course, I have this Year of the Wood Snake is also still up, and you can link to it from that. So that's just what my website looks like. I just wanted to give you a sense of what you would be looking at if you were to do that. So let's get into the chart, shall we? Let's really get into what's going on, and certainly let's get into the upcoming new moon in Pisces and the energy around that. Like I said, this is an invitation to exercise some serious mastery, and I would say a mastery that is, as the thumbnail image clearly represents here, you're talking about the capacity to really transcend what's going on down on the ground, and really have your perspective not so much up in the clouds, but above them. There's, again, a mastery that is involved in this degree of Pisces, of this upcoming new moon. But we're still right now finishing out, like I said, revise our thinking, reorient ourselves, turn away from what's not serving us here. So let's find... what I'd like to show as well, let's just look at where Mars is currently, because that really spoke to me in terms of its actual positioning. So I want to look at Stellarium, right? Stellarium is the software And let's see if it'll let me show the tab. Yes. Here we go. So Stellarium is a free software. If you're interested in it, it is, you just download it onto your device. You can download it onto your phone, onto any computer. It does take up a lot of space. When I say a lot, it's not really that much. It's not a small program, but it is like a astronomy software, and you can navigate the sky in all manner with Stellarium. I actually found out about it when I was taking classes in stellar physics and cosmology. Yes, I took college credit courses when I decided to be a professional astrologer in astronomy, so that I knew what I was talking about in terms of the actual sky itself. So stellar physics, or the physics of stars, and then cosmology in general. So we use Stellarium all the time in those classes, and so I just keep using it in terms of my astrology work. So here we are. This is where Mars is in currently right now, and this is the constellation of Gemini. And in fact, if you were to look at the actual art itself, you'll see that Mars is situated directly in between the two twins. And that really struck me. That struck me in terms of the bridge between these two areas that are seemingly opposites, right? Gemini represents the two poles of past and future, right? Black and white, this or that, and the two twins. And Castor and Pollux, as twins, one is mortal and one is immortal. So take whatever dichotomy you want and put it into the framework of Gemini. And right now, Mars is in between. And the degree that Mars is stationing direct, and that's all I wanted to share here. I want to bring up the chart now. The degree that Mars is stationing right now, 17 degrees, is about, it's really about a unfolding, like the growth, the germination, really. And so the seed is planted in the soil, right? And without the interaction between those two things, there is not the opening of the seed, which, on the surface is a destructive process, right? In order for the germination to happen, the shell of the seed, which is really represented by Aries, right? The first house, or Aries, that is the seed itself, right? That energy that is encapsulated, all that desire and potential for growth and to come into being is within the seed. But that seed has to break open in order for that growth to happen. And that in itself can seem like it is destructive to a certain extent, but that energy has to happen in order for that growth to happen as well. And so this is where Mars is stationing direct. So where is the contention in your life? Most likely that we really faced over the last couple of days with that last quarter moon that was in Sagittarius, no less, right? Representing the alchemy, representing transmutation, and representing the friction between the two opposing forces that is the catalyzing energy to transform. Where is that? And really leaning into it. How are you going to take that energy that is seemingly contentious and at odds with, two perspectives in your life, two situations, and actually see that it is the energy that stimulates real growth? Because that's what's really happening here. And Mars, of course, being the ruling planet of Aries, is penetrating, right? It is pushing out. That desire to be is what is pushing out of the seed and germinating something to grow. So it's different for all of us, of course, but this is the energy that is really present right now with Mars stationing direct. And so one thing that is very relevant to right now, in particular when it comes to Mars, is the fact that let me find it here, that Mercury in Pisces, which, is not exactly at its best. Let's be real here. Mercury is actually ruling the sign of Virgo, its opposite. So Mercury in Pisces is not at its best, right? Even though Mercury is at home in the other mutable signs, which is Gemini and Virgo. I tried to put those two together for some reason. In it is at its detriment in both Sagittarius and in Pisces. So, of course, Mercury in the realm, the nebulous, undifferentiated realm of Pisces, it's so easy for our own consciousness to just get lost and to just surrender into the like delusion, right? Into fantasy, into the stream of consciousness that is not our own. To keep those boundaries is very difficult with Mercury and Pisces. Now, it's not all bad. I mean, it's such an there's a lot of inspiration. The muse can be very accessible with Mercury and Pisces, okay? This trine to Mars that has already happened today, as here, I'll show it to you as we go back a couple hours here, and you can see it. There we go. Oh, I'm looking at this is the 25th. Sorry, guys. Okay, we'll go back to today, which is the 23rd. Mercury is going to meet with Saturn really soon. Oh, there's a T-square here with Chiron and Lilith. We'll talk about that in a second because that's tomorrow. All right, the 24th. The moon opposite Mars, that's definitely going to be, that's something that's happening tonight. And you can even see this is like a grand square. So just so you know, there's definitely more frustration and tension coming through, especially when you have the moon and Mars opposite each other. And there's a little bit of a mutual reception here, but let's not get ahead of ourselves. I want to talk about Mercury and Mars in this trine because even though Mercury is not at its best in Pisces, at least this trine to Mars, I think, is really stable, especially Mars being direct. It's really stabilizing it. So you can kind of, let's see here. There is this, it gives it a direction, right? Otherwise, our minds are just in this nebulous soup in Pisces, and sometimes our thoughts when Mercury's in Pisces are definitely not our own. We're just kind of drowning in everything that's surrounding us a lot of times. So with Mars here in this trine, right, this 120-degree angle, it gives tremendous mental energy, right? It keeps you busy. You're reading, you're writing, you're sharing your thoughts, right? And in this sense about where, what's growing, what's germinating. And there's some decisiveness. Now, granted, we're talking about water signs here, but that's not necessarily a bad thing when we're talking about Cancer and Pisces. But these energies of resourcefulness and a sense of adventure, right, with Mercury trine Mars, quick thinking, ingenuity, it's ideal for making plans. I think that this trine, as Mars is stationing direct, is giving some sort of like some rootedness and some groundedness to a certain extent of what otherwise Mercury in Pisces is just kind of like nebulous and all over the place. Focus, concentration, confidence in our plans, right? We just talked about the year of the snake, that this is about long range planning, right? Strategic planning, the long game, right? Being patient and diligent about what we are bringing forward, what we are creating, what we are manifesting, what our intentions are of what we want to have emerge over the year. So this trine gives a lot of that focused attention and confidence. We can be honest, we can be straightforward, very persuasive, especially with Mars involved here. There's just a lot of direct energy and, like I said, focus, concentration. With Mercury and Pisces, it's very difficult to focus, and you just kind of, like I said, your thoughts just kind of get swept into the flow of everything that's around you, and it can be very difficult to know what your thoughts are and where that ends and where the influence of all kinds of other things begins, right? Because in Pisces and Neptune, you have propaganda, you have delusion, right? You have fantasy as well. And so this gives a lot of the positive energy of Pisces, of being inspired and compassion and unconditional love and a sense of artistic flow. The Mars energy, it's very like stabilizing and focused. And I think this is really great because it also takes that focus of Mars and Cancer, what is germinating, what is growing. And there is this sense of a humanitarian larger picture to it that we can wrap our heads around, that it's not just about how we feel, because Cancer really is a sign about how we each individually feel, but a sense of the bigger picture here with Pisces, right? It's not just about us, it's about us, right? And get a sense of like a collective experience that we can at least tap into and give us focus, concentration, and confidence in relation to that. So now, and then, like I said, Mars is stationing direct, and we're moving into this last quarter phase here. So let's actually go into the new moon itself, because that's really what we're here to talk about, is the upcoming new moon. But I really felt like giving a sense of where we've been and where we are right now is very important. So I want to also share with you the degree of the new moon itself. And so the new moon is when the moon and the sun come into conjunction with each other, right? And that's going to be in the sign of Pisces. So we'll bring this up so it's exact. And so keep in mind that throughout the balsamic moon phase, the moon will come back to the Aquarius new moon degree, and we'll get to revisit that through the balsamic moon phase, which is where we distill and transform, and then we come into the new moon, which is going to be 9 to 10 degrees of Pisces. So I just want to bring it up so it's exact on the chart, and then we will, here we go, and then we will talk about. Now, something else to keep in mind, speaking of Mercury, okay, you can see at this point, Mercury has already come into a conjunction with Saturn. That is a talk of, if Mars and Mercury in a trine is very focused concentration and attention, the Mercury conjunct Saturn energy is very critical, right? Critical thinking that has to be applied to very serious and challenging mental work. And that's something that's coming this week, leading up to the new moon. So without a productive outlook for Mercury and Saturn coming together, you can kind of get caught in the negatives, right? And you can get very depressed. There can be difficulties in communication. Harsh or critical words can lead to relationship problems, right? And this is coming from astrologyking.com. These are not my words. But the idea here is that there's been a lot to keep us in a negative frame of mind. And if we cannot get our heads out of that and see where it's going, right? And keep our eye on the prize, keep our focus on the strategic long-term planning of the year of the snake, this type of transit can be very difficult, right? This is a good time for sustained concentration, though. So, and again, there's a certain amount of trust, trusting in our own discernment, trusting in our own sense of hope for a new beginning, and keeping ourselves busy and focused on the things that we know work for us is going to be very crucial with this transit leading up to the new moon. So now we're past that, and we have this new moon, and Mercury is in a sextile with Uranus, right? Uranus down here in conjunction with the Pleiades, right? The Uranus that is at 24 degrees Taurus. Mercury is also in coming into this sextile with it. Now, keep in mind that this sextile, this connection to Uranus, is going to be exactly where the full moon total lunar eclipse is also going to be. It's going to be in a sextile to Uranus. The sun is, I should say. The moon will be in Virgo and make a trine to Uranus. So this connection between Mercury and Uranus is already setting the tone for the full moon lunar eclipse, and it's happening at the new moon. So first, let's talk about the new moon energy, right? An aviator pursues his journey, flying through ground obscuring clouds. So this represents an ability to develop our skills and our power that transcend what seem like natural limitations, right? To operate in the realm of the spirit, of the mind that is above all of that stuff. And to have powers of comprehension that are truly transcendental, right? We're kind of exploring and creating solutions and ways to solve problems that maybe we couldn't really come to because we're too up close to it. We have to take ourselves into a perspective that is above things in order to get that 40,000 foot view, right? And from there, we're like, oh, I would have never seen these positions or these potentials when I was right up close to this situation. But now that I'm like way up here, I can actually develop, new hypotheses for how I'm going to solve some of these problems, something I never would have seen otherwise, right? And the inner realm and the outer realm, they're brought to a point where they are interacting with each other in order to, again, solve a problem. There's this power of observation that really does lead to a sense of mastery from this position. And we are the aviator, right? We are the aviator that's pursuing our journey. So this is the energy of the new moon that is emerging, that the intention that we put out, and then through the next month will start to come about. Now, also keep in mind that the next full moon that is related to this emergent energy is an eclipse. And so we also know that whatever it is that is emerging, whatever our intentions are, it is going to be something that has so much more to do with what comes about over the next 6 months as opposed to just in the next 4 months, like a normal lunar cycle would be. So there's this competence in judgment and long-range planning here that is really being offered to us with this upcoming new moon. Now, when Mercury and Uranus are in a sextile, as I've already pointed out, it's a 60-degree angle. It is an angle that is very harmonious, but there's transformation involved with a sextile, but we have to participate, right? Trines are very foundational and supportive. You don't really have to do anything to get anything out of it. Sometimes they make you a little lazy because you're just like, oh, this is just really stabilizing. Sextile is a little different. You have to actually participate in the process. So when Mercury and Uranus come into this kind of aspect with each other, it brings the news, it brings the conversations that are very stimulating. There are unexpected directions and daily routines that take a detour, perhaps, right? Because Mercury does represent like your daily travels and your daily routines and, your commute and all that stuff. But those things may take a detour, but you have to actually take advantage of it, right? So along the way, you learn new things, you meet new people, and there are thought-provoking ideas that might come out, but you have to do something with them, right? There's a responsibility here that we all have to play our part, that we all have our dharma. And maybe, again, there's this 40,000-foot view that's going along with this, that with the new moon and this sextile between Mercury and Uranus at this moment is just like, oh, hey, let's, take a different flight path, right? Maybe we are taking our destination is changing. Maybe we have to go in a different direction, something that we didn't really anticipate, but is really actually taking us in a direction we would never have gone in before, right? So discoveries can come from flashes of insight or in dream time here. And you have really heightened senses when you have Mercury and Uranus. And then on top of that, you have Mercury in Pisces, and then you have Uranus in conjunction with the Pleiades. So these are two very large starseed markings, these degrees. And so not only are your senses heightened just because of the transit itself, but you also have the connection with Pisces, you also have the connection with the Pleiades, and so there are perceptions that are widening. There's an open-mindedness that leads to original and very ingenious discoveries in this moment. So you want to take the opportunities as they're presenting themselves here. And maybe it's not something you anticipated, but wow, it's allowing you to actually pursue your journey in a direction you would have never considered. Like, oh, this is emerging in a way I never thought. And I never would have thought had this shift not happen with this type of even just a new perspective with Mercury and Uranus like this. So seeing things from a different point of view may help in what? Solving lingering problems. This is a theme right now, is about different point of view, something shifting, a detour that you didn't anticipate that is leading you to your dharma and being realistic about it, but also that there's no problem that we can't solve without, the right perspective, right? And so this is pretty powerful for the new moon that is preceding the next eclipse cycle. So the next big transit that's coming along during this first 2 weeks is that Venus is going to start her retrograde. Now, again, like I mentioned, the degree that Venus and Mercury and the solar eclipse happening is all the same. And this is I think, very important to pay attention to, because now Mercury and Venus are personal planets. So these retrogrades are going to affect us like in our day-to-day personal lives. Everybody talks about the Mercury retrograde in terms of communication and things breaking. Venus retrograde is, I think, a reevaluation, truly, of, especially in Aries, what is it that we want to complete? What is it that we want to come full circle? What type of energy do, what really satisfies us in terms of our desires, right? In a very palpable and visceral way, right? Venus and Aries. And, Venus is about what is valuable to us. And, so what types of desires and potentialities hold value to us or with us, right? So there's an idealization that is surrounding this degree of 10 to 11 degrees Aries. It's going to retrograde. Venus is going to retrograde back to 25 degrees of Pisces. This is really important because, number one, this is where the sun will be at the lunar eclipse that's coming, 24 to 25 degrees Pisces. But also, so Venus will retrograde back to that degree. That's also pretty much where, the North Node has been sitting. Saturn will be there, this whole area here. But the degree, 25 degrees Pisces, has a very distinct Sabian symbol. The purging of the priesthood, a purification. Okay, so there's still more of this happening. Okay, and that's something to consider, that Venus is going to retrograde back and is going to station direct in, kind of like mid-April. The 12th of April is when Venus stations direct at 25 Pisces. So we'll go over that a lot more in the eclipse forecast. But just to point out that the retrograde starts on the 1st of March, okay? And she won't leave her shadow until the 16th of May. And Mars leaves its retrograde shadow, I think, on the 7th of May. So we know that May, things are going to start moving in new directions, manifesting in brand new directions. And right now we're not only laying the groundwork, we're starting to actually nurture the germination of what is going to fully come into bloom, I think, come May, right? Now, Mercury, of course, is meeting the North Node in Pisces and will meet Neptune on the 2nd, right? And so, again, in Pisces, this is a double-edged sword, in my opinion, because you either have, it's very positive or it's very negative in terms of the way it impacts our thinking, especially in Pisces. Like, there's just no way without that mastery that we intend to emerge to really navigate this field, right? In its highest manifestation, Mercury conjunct Neptune gives very accurate psychic perception at all levels with unbiased processing of spiritual information. Now you see why a sense of true mastery of these realms is essential for this type of conjunction not to get lost in the negative part of this, which is misconception, irrationality, confusion, fear, and paranoia. And when people come up against these things, there's deceit, there's betrayal, there's lies, there's poison, there's all underhanded tactics, okay? Now, at the same time that this transit is happening in Pisces, at the last degrees of Pisces, no less, the sun is in a square to Jupiter, okay? Also the sun in Pisces. So, and of course, we've gone from Aquarius time, which is certainly very heady and cerebral, and it's a mental air sign, and now it's very experiential with the sun in Pisces, right? It's all flow and feeling. And so, but Jupiter's in Gemini, which is very much still an air sign. So Mercury and Neptune come together at these last degrees of Pisces, and the discernment is absolutely essential. And I feel like this is not something that necessarily is going to be figured out in the moment, right? I mean, for those who have been really doing this work with themselves, this type of transit will be like, you will be the prism that the light moves through and refracts. You know what I mean? You'll see everything for each vibration or frequency that it is, because that's what this 29 degrees Pisces really represents, is light through a prism. It's still light, but then every single frequency that is represented by each color is distinct. This transit of Mercury conjunct Neptune is going to be like it will separate everything into its appropriate wavelength. But if you are, and you can express these insights through all kinds of compassionate, supportive types of words or even thought projections, right? It just depends on where you're at and where these transits happen, right? But on the negative, I mean, the misconceptions, the irrationality, the confusion, and the fear and the paranoia, not realizing that just because light is distinguished into all of these different frequencies, it's still light, right? It's still all light. It's just different wavelengths of light. And sometimes that can really freak people out if they don't understand that. But then you have the sun in a square to Jupiter, right? Which again is another double-edged sword, definitively. And you can feel very confident, very proud, very optimistic and lucky, and you can express your exuberance. And how you express it, I think, is very critical, though, right? So you could express it like this good fortune, and have a sense of like personal power in living your ideals, and really expanding on your capacity to perform a social function, right? You get this individual fulfillment out of performing a social function that society kind of attaches some prestige, right? And this can range from all kinds of things. It doesn't have to be something so publicly known. This could be something just in your personal life. However, right? You want to show respect and moderation and discipline here, because if you take on too much, it wastes your energy. If you overdo it, you strain yourself. You want to focus your energy on just, very singular things here. Because again, as the light moves through the prism of our own self, we may find ourselves very overwhelmed in this moment. And if that's the case, there's a tendency to like overdo it, right? And get kind of pulled into your, whatever your demons are, your addictive demons. But working hard, doing your own homework really is how you make your own luck, which is, Jupiter really represents that. So good fortune may fall in your lap with a transit like this. It really could, but it's not likely. It's more about like, I've been doing the work and now the opportunities are presenting themselves to act on all of the hard work and homework I've done to lead up to this point. It's very important that you use moderation in this type of situation. And with Venus stationing retrograde, it could be kind of dicey. I'm not going to lie, right? Because we have this ideal that we're starting to maybe pull back on. Maybe things aren't the way that, or maybe our desires aren't exactly as ideal as we'd like them to be. And so maybe this too, these types of transits, Sun square Neptune, and I will point out here that Mercury was just in a square to Jupiter. I'm sorry, Sun square Jupiter. Mercury was just in a square to Jupiter right around the time of the third quarter moon. So I felt that challenge really building, and then the emotional aspect with the moon and Sag got involved, and it was just a huge emotional overload. And so that theme's going to come back up again with the Sun in a square to Jupiter, and maybe something positive is coming out of. Maybe it's really just a matter of seeing that situation in a completely different way, and we have such a sharp and unbiased perspective with Mercury and Neptune together that we just know the full picture of all of it, and we see the good luck in that situation when maybe at first it didn't seem like it at all, right? So Mercury comes into Aries right after this on the 3rd, comes into a sextile with Pluto on the 5th, right? So now we're getting into our first quarter moon phase, right? Where there's a crisis in action. What do I do, right? What do I do? And that's going to be a moon in Gemini that is in a square to the Pisces sun, and that's on the 6th, right? And so you could see this energy starting to build. It meets Jupiter and then comes into a square. It comes into a square with the sun, and this degree of is actually where. Well, never mind. That was something personal. That 17 degrees Gemini, that's actually something that came up for me personally. And I'm like, oh, that's where Mars is, something where Mars was at a time that something really crucial happened in early August. That I was like, oh, that's so I know that that's going to, something around that's going to come back up for me personally. So don't worry about that. Don't worry about that. I mean, worry about it if you need to, but at the same time, I thought maybe that was something that was more generalized, and I'm realizing now I was like, nope, that's something that had something to do with me personally. Anyway, let's see here. The moon in a square to the sun, right? And then it also squares Saturn. So again, taking responsibility for your emotional reactions is going to be essential around this time of the 6th of March, when there is this square between the moon and the sun, the first quarter square. Now, it does kind of lift here when we get to the 8th, because the sun and and Mars will be in a trine right with the moon here with Mars. So that's going to be incredibly impactful, and it boosts self-confidence and enthusiasm when the sun and Mars are in a trine like this, making this a really good time to start new projects. And with the moon with Mars at the time, like the emotional sense of confidence and enthusiasm is also going to be, we're just going to feel it so deeply and powerfully about like really fulfilling our responsibilities, right? There's going to be something so powerful about fulfilling our responsibilities that are starting to germinate, whatever they are for us. And this sun in a trine to Mars at this time, we feel really strong and courageous, right? Use this initiative to get the ball rolling. So it's not going to take long, to get to this, to start really getting the ball rolling from this new moon period, and especially with this Mars stationing direct. We feel the energy. It's not going to be really until this time that we can start really acting on it, or really just like feel that initiative to get something going here. And this is the 8th of March. So this is a great time to, impress someone, or make an impression on someone. Maybe there's a performance here that is just spectacular, and it really, we can really like identify with that and feel very sustained by that. And that's, the sun in Pisces here. And you also can understand what motivates you due to a conscious awareness of your desires here. And feel a real strong urge to take action under this transit. So the 8th, once we get into the first quarter moon phase and come into the 8th, I mean, there's going to be this real strong motivation to actually act on things and use our initiative and get the ball rolling in some way. And the feeling with the moon in Cancer, oh my God, so much courage and enthusiasm and initiative in this moment. It's going to be pretty remarkable. Now, on the 11th of March is when Mercury and Venus come into a conjunction. Now, Venus is in her retrograde, it's true, but Mercury isn't retrograde quite yet. And these two coming together, it really fosters personal interaction, harmonious communication. It really is great for sharing love and affection, socializing, things like that. And it's much easier to express what you love about people, and it really encourages cooperation. Now, with the retrograde of Venus and the degree that they're conjunct, which is, looking into the crystal ball essentially, it encourages cooperation, but I do get the sense with this Venus in its retrograde that there is a bit of I don't want to say apprehension about the whole picture, but a willingness to use our senses, to our intuitive senses about what the big picture, right? Mercury, on the other hand, with our mind and our communication, we may find ourselves wanting to, really resolve conflicts, find peaceful settlements to disputes, break down barriers to progress. But I will say the retrograde to Venus is going to have us being a little bit apprehensive about fully. It's not saying that we shouldn't encourage cooperation and negotiating and resolving conflicts, but I think that there's going to be a need to employ our intuitive bullshit detector in terms of the big picture. That's all. That's what I'm going to say. Because right after that, the Sun and Saturn coming into a conjunction, as you can see here in Pisces, is going to ask us to really give of ourselves almost completely and to stand up and be counted. Hard work, discipline, patience to attend to our duties and obligations, right? You might have to take on extra responsibility. There is a sense of really substantiating something here with the Sun conjunct Saturn that can be very satisfying, right? There's a time of achievement and recognition, but it can also be a time of deprivation and insecurity and hardship. And if we are not full enough to substantiate everything within ourselves, things might start to fall apart here. And that's why, again, this Mercury conjunct Venus that's retrograde really is sticking out to me at this moment of just like, there's something here. Just make sure your bullshit detector is fine-tuned, right? See the big picture. And maybe there's a conflict within yourself that needs to be resolved so that when this transit really comes into an exact configuration, which is the next day on the 12th. I mean, we're getting right up to the full moon here, right? Relationships, if things start to fall apart by the time we get to here, right? It might be time to change course and set new goals. Okay, this is going to be one of those checkpoints. The 11th and the 12th. Ooh, boy, I'm getting a big hit here. The 11th and 12th, if it may be a signal to change course and set new goals, right? It really depends on your diligence and responsibility over what the last year, because the Sun and Saturn are conjunct once a year, just like the Sun is conjunct with everything once a year. And so over the last year, it depends on how things have gone. And so if you've really been attending to your responsibility and you've been diligent, this can be a time of great satisfaction and achievement. The Mercury Venus conjunction, you see the big picture, you're aware of the big picture, you know that there's more to assess around your personal security and comfort and value around things with Venus in its retrograde, knowing also that Mercury is going to retrograde again. But there's what you've been doing over the last year, at the very least, that can come forward. You can stand up and be counted for that. But if things are falling apart by this point, it might be a signal to change course and set new goals, right? Because knowing that we're on the cusp at this point, on the 11th and 12th of March, coming into the eclipse cycle, which is a cycle of 6 months and is very karmic. It has a lot to do with the soul's journey. It's a really good checkpoint to be like, is this what I want to take with me over the next 6 months? Because there's going to be inevitable change. There's going to be challenges. There's going to be reevaluation with the Mercury retrograde. There's going to be a revision of attitude that is going to come through the next 6 months. And so even just being aware of that is going to be really important. And you can see that at the time of this happening, which is the 12th of March, we have the moon conjunct Draco. So, I don't know, just something to keep in mind. And that's really the last big transit before we come into the 14th of March, which is the full moon lunar eclipse. So there'll be plenty of information. And I will be putting out a forecast for that, a general forecast. I certainly am going to share with, as I've shared with you already, there is opportunity to book your own personal reading around those things. And I think that's all I have to offer today, my friends, in terms of this new moon forecast. What is emerging here? What intentions are we being invited to set? There's this mastery of being able to continue to pursue our journey in a way that is transcending what seems like natural limitations. It's not to say we shouldn't be realistic about what's happening. We have to actually work with those things, but it's only from that perspective of the 40,000 foot view that people like to say here. However, that view that is massively up in so you can see everything, right? Then you could see solutions, you can see perspectives that otherwise, when you're right up close to it, you can't see, right? And that often is that's a huge barrier to solving any problems. And that is very difficult when you are living the day to day, right? When you're living the day to day. And so, yeah. That's what I got for this new moon forecast, my friends. Thank you for being here. I really appreciate all of you so very much. If you have any questions, concerns, feedback, please feel free to leave them in the comments section of this video. Of course, my email is also linked in the description box if you have any questions or want to get more information about anything. Of course, if you go to the website, you can get on the email list. You can browse all of my services. If anything speaks to you, please feel free to book something or reach out if you have any questions about anything. I will see you very soon for the eclipse season forecast that will be coming up. And yeah. I hope everyone is doing as well as they can. This is a very tumultuous and very intense time, as we've been talking about for months since the last eclipse cycle, actually, that we were like, February is going to be really feeling intense, and it really is. So just know that the opportunities to really act on the initiative and to really stand up and be counted, it's coming. Absolutely. Just, weeks from now. So there's a big purge happening, right? And things might not happen exactly as quickly as you may want them to happen, and they may not look exactly the way that your ego or your mind right this moment is envisioning them. But, trusting yourself, cultivating the relationship to spirit, whatever that means to you, is your best course of action as far as I'm concerned. And knowing that if you can elevate your perspective to the point where you are not directly being, swung around by everything that's happening on the daily, and having that long range planning, that strategy, that patience of the year of the snake. There's a lot to be, there's just a lot of really amazing benefit that can come out of that, but it does require our patience and our diligence, as we've talked about already. So we're just moving into the next phase of that. So my friends, thank you for being here. I truly appreciate each and every one of you so very much. I'll see you on the next video. Take care.